Hi, and welcome to the next webinar in our Mental Health and Wellbeing in COVID-19 series. My name is Theron Knightenfit, and as always, we have Mark Baker with us.
Hi everyone, good to be here again.
You can see we are dressed alike today. Great minds
I don't think it's
alike.
exactly the same shirt, Theron.
It's not exactly the same, but we're presenting a nice official
mine's
image.
better.
I like it.
I think mine's better.
Well, it probably is. Probably is. I've got too many kids here ruining my clothes. So stains. I got stains on my clothes probably, but you can't see them in the video. Anyway, let's dive in. Today we're going to be talking about avoiding the negative emotional impact of social media, and how appropriate and relevant is this theme, Mark, for this time right now, where for many people, I guess they're probably consuming a lot more social media than normal. So yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting for our viewers to just be empowered and equipped, I think, with some of what we'll be talking about. To do some recap from the previous episode, we talked about the drama triangle and how we can deal with tough relationships. We introduced you to the TED as another alternative to the constant drama of the drama triangle, and we made a couple of resources available to help you move towards healthy relational behaviors. Our key question, of course, was how do you break out of the drama triangle? And there you can see we've got a little picture of the TED. If you missed this webinar, please go back and have a look at it. It's really full of some great ideas and great content, and a great interview as well with our guest. Okay, Mark, today, avoiding the negative emotional impact of social media. We're going to be looking at opening our awareness of the fact, and this is a fact, that social media can detract from our lives. We're not going to be all, negative about social media. It's really powerful and really beneficial, but it does have power to detract, especially if we consume it in a certain way. So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about how we can avoid bias and blindness from pulling us down, and how we can really fight for a positive lens. Okay, Mark, walk us through some of this research around social media.
Yeah, well, just to say at the outset, Theron, we can't possibly cover all of the research that's been done on social media over the last kind of 10, 15 years, and there really is a lot. So I do encourage people to go and look a little bit deeper. But just a couple of interesting things we'd love to touch on, really just to open our eyes to what it could be doing to us, is essentially that, the American Psychological Association does an assessment of stress nationally every year. And in 2017, so just a few years ago, they did an assessment specifically on social media and how it impacts on people's stress levels and emotional and mental health. And this is what they found. They found that 43% of their sample, I think their sample was almost 4,000 people. So, not a huge sample in America's context, but a big sample size for a study like this. 43% were considered to be constant checkers. In other words, not checkers like ShopRite checkers, but checkers like constantly checking their devices to see what the new updates were. 44% of people felt a disconnection with their family, specifically as a result of social media. And this blew my mind. The one on the right over there is that 35% said that they were less likely to meet in person with friends or family because they had the information already on social media. So you've got 35% of that particular sample.
Sorry.
Go for it.
Just to clarify, you meaning less likely to meet in person?
Yeah.
So don't need to see you this weekend. I've already caught up with your life. I know.
So it's you and me, Theron, old friends, spent a lot of life together, and now I'm going, well, I can get the updates on your kids on social media, so why do I need to come around for a cup of tea? And essentially what this is...
As if relationship is just about information.
Yeah, totally. So there seems to be this progression away from meeting together, because we don't need to be sharing information like that anymore. And something that it made me think in terms of social media, and you saying, Theron, that we don't need to just think of it as a big scary beast, is a good analogy is probably something like fire. When fire is contained and it's controlled, it's a wonderful thing that can bring warmth and even connection, But when it gets out of hand, it really starts causing a lot of damage. And that's really what we're looking at here is, the kind of damage that can start to happen when it's unbridled. Have a look then at that little green box at the bottom there. 86% of their samples fitted into a category of what people would have suggested was what they call device addiction. In other words, people were suggesting that they were addicted to their devices. And this seemed to double the amount of stress that those people were experiencing. So really there seems to be this progressive increase in stress for people. And what I'd love to look at is just not only some of the stats from this poll, because this was essentially a poll done by the American Psychological Association, but let's have a look at some research that was done on the impact on mental health of social media. And this comes from Romano, also in 2017. They had a look at something called problematic internet use. And this was for people that were spending really significant amounts of time on social media, engaging in online content. And these are people that would, for themselves, it was self-reported problematic internet use. But look at the average here. The average was 5 hours and 17 minutes per day engaging online, and that was the average. So there was some people that were between 6 and 9 hours, and there was a whole lot, almost 14%, that were more than 9 hours a day just engaging on social.
Who has the time?
So I mean, this is hectic stat. Yeah, who's got the time?
Aren't they trying to do it? Aren't they like working or trying to do something meaningful? Wow.
Yeah, totally. But anyway, there was 4 outcomes that they found. And by the way, they were having a look at certain physiological markers. They found that after 15 minutes, you can see the little guy in the yellow box on the left there. They did an assessment pre and post 15 minutes of people that were considering themselves to have problematic internet usage. And what they found is these 4 outcomes. They blew my mind, Theron. The one is that there was an increase in heart rate. So, of course, you'll remember from when we had a look at the heart-brain connection, some of the adrenal gland stuff that we looked at. There's this heart rate increase, the accelerator pedals going on in the person's body. There was a decrease in mood. That's the next sign there. This was just after 15 minutes, by the way. There was an increase in systolic blood pressure. So they measured blood pressure, and this is what the heart is sending out from the heart, as I understand it. And so the heart is essentially pumping harder to send more blood because there's so much activity happening. And then there was an increase in anxiety. So these are fairly negative markers for someone that's actually sitting stagnant in front of a device. This is not what should be happening when someone's running away from a lion in the bush, as we've described before in one of our webinars, where it would be helpful to conjure up all this stuff to get away. Yeah. This is someone sitting in front of a device that's essentially having this very taxing response. And then just that last image over there, Theron, is just that, some of the other signs that they found was that this problematic internet use was associated with depression, anxiety, social isolation, and impulsivity. What they found, that's the picture of the little syringe there, is that some of these signs are similar to those seen in individuals who have stopped using sedatives or opiate drugs. And so really we're sitting with a scenario here where there really are some withdrawal symptoms after not taking your hit of social media, which I think is quite concerning. I don't know if you want to just jump in there.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. No, nothing I need to say. Let's move right along.
But let's just remember, this is when things are fairly unbridled. And so let's just have a look at one other study that started looking at, what does this do not only to these physiological and mood aspects, and with people that have problematic usage, but let's just look at normal functioning people and their impact on well-being. This is a study from a little bit longer ago. But I think the findings are still mind-blowing for me. They actually measured people 5 times a day. They sent them sporadic messages 5 times a day in this assessment. And they wanted to measure 2 things: the moment-by-moment fluctuation in the sense of well-being, so literally my sense of positive or negative mood, if you like, and then the sense of well-being in my life as a whole. So they wanted to get a sense of long-term life satisfaction and well-being and moment-by-moment satisfaction and well-being, 5 SMSs a day over a period of, I think it was a couple of months. What they found was that Facebook led to a decrease in well-being in terms of moment-by-moment well-being and a decrease in life well-being. In other words, the perception that one is doing well in one's life. And they also had a group that they were assessing at the same time where they were just letting them do social interactions. In other words, not through social media, but actual social interactions. That's the group underneath. And what they found is that the more people interacted face-to-face, interpersonally, the more their well-being increased. And so there was a positive relationship between actual social human-to-human interactions and well-being, and a negative correlation between Facebook and well-being. I mean, this just blew my mind, Theron.
Yeah, I think, can I jump in quick? Just bearing in mind as well, the next slide we're going to be talking about is also, I think, about Facebook. We don't have anything against Facebook, so it's not that we're trying to speak against Facebook. I think it's just it has been in recent years, even getting over a decade now, probably the preeminent form of social media, and it's such an easy pool to study in. So I think that's why a lot of the researchers do that. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that caveat in there in case Zuckerberg is listening to our webinar series.
Thanks. I mean, he should be listening. This is a great webinar series here. But no, this is published as having been done on actual Facebook users, so we're just representing the studies here. But just one last thing on this study, they said, they ended like this. On the surface, Facebook provides an invaluable resource for fulfilling the basic human need for social connection. Rather than enhancing well-being, however, these findings suggest that Facebook may undermine it, and they suggest that social media leads to what they call impoverished well-being. So these are just some of the impacts that social media is having on us there. But what I'd love to look at, and what's really going to be helpful for us, is not, as you said in the beginning, the big scary story of how it can be negative, but let's look at why. Why is it that it has this kind of negative impact? And there's two studies that I'd love to share with you. The one is the impact on our mental well-being and the reason why it would have an effect on self-esteem. And I'm sure many of you would have seen in the media or on social media, ironically, that there's this inverse relationship between frequency of use. And again, this study was also done on Facebook. I think that's just because of how prominent Facebook was. This was a study in 2014. So, of course, Facebook was more dominant then. But the frequency of use on Facebook is inversely correlated with self-esteem. And they wanted to have a look at why. And what they found was that there is this upward social comparison where people, when they are thinking that other people's lives are doing better than their own, it seems to cause them to have a negative impact on self-esteem. In other words, if I, in my social feed, are seeing a whole lot of other people where I am comparing them and they are doing better than I am. They're earning more, driving a better car, living in a better house, married to a pretty woman, kids are at a better school, etc., etc. Then we sit with the scenario where it has a dampening effect on self-esteem. In other words, it puts us on a slippery slope. And what they found is the inverse. And some of those numbers that are showing you there are essentially just assessing whether there's a statistically significant difference between them. And they found that where there was downward social comparison, there wasn't the same kind of statistically significant impact on self-esteem. And so I think what this leaves us with, Theron, is that there's two problems with social media. The one is that we tend to surround ourselves sometimes with these celebrity characters, the people that we're following, where of course we're going to look up at their lives. Of course, if I'm following Charlize Theron or Trevor Noah, of course they're earning more than I am, driving better cars. They definitely don't have better looking wives, that's for sure. But there's this upward social comparison. So that's the one issue, is who we are following and what we are viewing. The second nuance to upward social comparison is that we don't see the real story behind it. And we'll get onto that a little later, I'm sure, Theron, when we talk about the being and doing. But essentially, we only see the facade of everything that is perfect, and we get the impression, of course, that everybody's life is happy and smiling. Look at Christmas dinner this year. Those people's families, they were so happy. Look at their wedding. They had a perfect wedding, where we don't see the behind the screen, the behind the scenes shots. And that upward social comparison has a negative impact on our self-esteem.
Can I jump in here? I think something that's really worth stressing is that upward social comparison as a construct and as an idea is about when we compare ourselves to superior others with positive characteristics. So it's upward social comparison is an old idea. It doesn't just come from the social media world. It's about comparing yourself to people who have more positive characteristics than you. But I think the heart of what Mark is sharing here is that online, even people who are not more upwardly, they don't have more positive characteristics than you, they appear to have them. So everyone, as Mark says, that photograph from the Christmas dinner, it may have been the only time they were smiling for the whole meal. Nobody reports on the family stress and drama that was surrounding that photograph. And of course, the same is true for everything else. So just something about the nature of social media is that it lends us to believe that others are happier when they might not be. So it is, in essence, a false upward social comparison.
Yeah. Totally.
Over to you.
Totally, Theron. I think, just to move on then to another aspect of the impact on mental health. or on our kind of psychological well-being is, another slide that, another slide, on the next slide, but another study that was done by Feinstein and a number of his colleagues was essentially having a look at, why is it that Facebook is correlated with depressive symptoms? Because there's been a number of studies showing that more Facebook usage leads to, and you're actually right there, and there's a lot of Facebook in here. Yeah. I think it's literally because the dating of these studies are 2013, 2014. But more social media usage, more depressive symptoms. And they wanted to answer this question, why is that happening? And what they found is that there really seems to be not a direct link between social media and these depressive symptoms, but an indirect one. And it is mediated by something called rumination, which really is psychologically like picking at a scab and not letting it heal. And there's a whole lot of things that happen when we're watching social media that start playing on our minds. And when eventually we're going back to our normal life, all of those things that weren't in our minds have been downloaded into our minds with those upward social comparisons that then we ruminate over. They become downward spirals, some of the stuff we've spoken about in the previous episodes. And that then leads to these depressive symptoms. Yeah. And so these two studies are really helpful for us, Theron, because it helps us to see, number one, this upward social comparison is what leads us to having a hit on our self-esteem. In other words, feeling worse about ourselves. And it is the rumination, that constantly thinking about what we saw on social media, that leads to the depressive symptoms that people are facing as a result.
Let me just give one quick little example. If you take LinkedIn, let's throw LinkedIn under the bus here for a while instead of Facebook. You get those notifications about, congratulate this person on their promotion or whatever it is. Yeah. If you have not been promoted and all of a sudden there's like 7 people around you who've been promoted, that leads to that voice of how come everyone else is so much more successful? And that's what rumination is. It's sort of chewing on that, and then you come back to it later. Oh, that guy in my office, he got promoted, I didn't, but my best mate's been promoted and my ex-girlfriend's been promoted and everyone around me is getting promoted except me. But it's not everyone. It's 7 people that you just happen to have seen. So that feeds this negative self-talk and rumination.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Let's move on quickly. I want to run us through a couple of photos here. I'd love to. I'm not going to say much. I'm just going to show you guys, the viewers. I'm going to show you a number of photos. Just have a look at these, and we'll chat. We'll chat through them in a second. Okay, so what did you notice? I actually must be honest, I didn't put the series of pictures together. Mark put it together for me, and then I looked at it, and I want to tell you what I saw. I just saw a whole lot of people on social media, in some of them really important moments. Like, for instance, this first one, they've just been married, and they should be the happiest day of their lives, and they're just on their devices. But as I scrolled through these pictures, I started noticing that there's nothing in their hands. I can tell from their body language what they're doing, and that's what I'm reading as I look at these. But in this series, there's nothing there. There's nothing there. What they're looking at is nothing. And how profound is that? I mean, Mark, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it just blew my mind, especially some of those couples there. And I think because, trying to just navigate marriage in my own life and relationships, hoping to be a dad one day and just thinking about that, I've realized that, social media and this constant checking of phones has been a huge point of disagreement and disrelationship between my wife and I, causing us not to be drawn closer, but actually to be focused pretty much away from each other and spending time in what feels like together, just because we're physically in proximity together, but very much engaging as you say, nothing. Yeah. And, it just has been such food for thought for me to just reevaluate, where am I spending my time? What am I giving myself to? How much are we engaging together? And then that all-important term that I love, impoverished well-being. Yeah. I think these are impoverished relationships, if ever there was pictures of them.
And the irony is they're missing so much. There's so much happening in each photograph.
Yeah.
Anyway, we need to jump onto our interview with our guest today. So we're going to be moving across. We have Julia, who is a social worker, and she works a lot with families and with teenagers, actually. So she's really well primed to speak to us about just the whole impact and influence of social media in our lives. So Julia, can you hear me?
Hi, Theron. Yes, thank you.
Hi, welcome to the show. I don't think I gave your surname just now when I introduced you. You are Julia Camphor. That is who you are.
Correct.
Should I tell the viewers that is who she is? She, as I said, is a social worker with a lot of experience working with families. And the whole field of social work, that whole arena is one that is so deeply relational. So I'm really excited about what she will be able to share with us today. Julia, when we were chatting earlier, you said that you work mostly with families and you help with parenting, but that recently you've also been involved with a school. Is that correct?
Yes, so my passion is adolescents and families,
Okay.
and as we know, it's quite intertwined. You can't really work with one and not the other.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think what applies to the adolescents in schools in relation to social media is quite valuable for parents as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not old enough yet to have adolescent children, but I can already feel myself getting older and older and older. In fact, at work, some of my colleagues tease me that I'm like this old man because I don't understand how the internet works anymore. 10 years ago, I used to understand. Anyway, so I'm definitely feeling that I'm entering into that season of life where I'm becoming less and less aware of what the reality is around social media. So I think what you can share today is going to be very helpful and beneficial for a lot of the parents who are listening in. And of course, you don't have to just be a parent to get value out of what's being shared. I'm sure you are intelligent enough to be able to apply this in your own life as well. Okay, the first question I'd love to ask you, and then let's just see where we go from there, is what can you tell me from your experience and from what you've seen with adolescents and even with parents, the impact of social media on identity and on identity formation? We've dealt in this webinar series quite a lot around the identities that we have that get built up over our life story. Tell me about the impact on identity from social media.
Yeah, I think that is the fundamental phase with adolescents where developmental theorists speak about identity versus role confusion. And I think as adults, our identities have also become intertwined with social media.
Yeah.
So basically, when we're speaking about what is your identity, we can almost say your social identity when using social media.
Okay. You mean in terms of it's a different identity? Your social identity is one thing?
It could be. So there's concepts like catfishing, for example, someone pretending to be someone who they're not online. And the nice thing in that regard is that when you're on social media, you can orchestrate what you want people to see and how you want to be perceived. It may not necessarily be a true reflection, but you are in control of what you post.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of adolescents currently, because they have been reared almost in the era with internet and social media and at this rapid pace, unfortunately, the biggest influence on their identity is social media.
Yeah.
And so I think there is where we as adults need to monitor and be vigilant, but also just see what our children view our profiles as, because the adults are very much on social media as well as the kids.
Yeah. I mean, we learn so much from our parents, and our children learn so much. I'm fairly confident to say my kids aren't learning much from me when it comes to social media. I go on Facebook about once every 6 months, and then just say yes, and accept all these invites that I don't even know who they are. Anyway, but I put very little effort actually into my own sort of social identity on social media. But let's take this conversation forward into the current moment that we're in. I don't know if you are still having interaction with any of your clients during the lockdown now, but let's extrapolate out this identity dynamic with social media into the current moment where we may be hit with all sorts of different attacks on our identity, and some of those things we've looked at over the last few weeks with the webinar series. But what impact do you see social media having right now for people who are in isolation at home?
Sure. Well, I think yourself and Mark have touched on some of those issues. For example, just how many people are you exposed to within your house? There's people that live alone. Others have grandparents, aunts, uncles, children, whatever. It could be quite a full house.
Yeah.
And so this issue of being on social media with the amount of free time that you have is also, I think, an interesting correlation. The more free time you have, or the bolder you are, you tend to seek that connection via social media, which unfortunately means that you see a lot of what I spoke about before, the sort of filtered reality, where people are, I don't know, I heard you guys were talking a lot about Facebook. So things like TikTok, these TikTok videos that's got adolescents doing it. I saw a parent who commented she wishes her child knew her schoolwork as well as she did the TikTok moves. So I have been engaging, and what I'm seeing is that people are doing these TikTok videos, and it's quite humorous, but it's also time consuming and taking away from valuable time that you could be spending with your family or loved ones. The whole combination of what are you using your time for during this time. And there's a big debate about productivity, I suppose, in this time.
Yeah. What would your advice be to parents who they don't even know what TikTok is? They think that's something to do with the clock. And, and they're like, what's this lady talking about? But they do know that their teenager's just on his phone all day. Well, what's your advice to them? I mean, I assume you're not recommending they go and confiscate their device and make them mow the lawn. That's not going to necessarily have the relational impact positively at home. But what advice could you give to some of our listeners?
Well, I think, again, the core message during this time is for us to live a balanced life, because usually what happens when we are at work as adults, we usually say, oh, I wish I could work from home. It's winter's approaching, we don't want to get up out of bed and travel, etc. Now is the time that you have that opportunity. And I think to shift your mindset about what could it look like if I was entertaining, running my own business or working from home. How would I balance the demands of children, spouses, whatever's going on in our lives? But I would say that if you are able to monitor the amount of time that you're spending on social media, to also just find ways to minimize, because you could be robbing yourself and your family of quite valuable experiences, and to use social media as a form of connecting as opposed to just watching and being this online presence with minimal real value for that connection that you have.
I'm actually just reminded of a resource we made available in the previous webinar, a set of questions. Two resources. One, a set of questions aimed at helping you foster a depth in relationship with one person, and then a little pack we made available for people to cut out and put in a jar, just 50 different questions for them to ask at the dinner table with the family. And it brings me back to advice given by Dr. Leon Crevet in one of our earlier episodes about how do we get balance again when life gets out of balance. He was talking about stress, and he was saying so many people try to take things out of life to get balance, and he was saying, no, you've got to figure out where to put things in. So maybe now's the time to put something in, like spend the time. Maybe you're not a family that normally eats around the dinner table, but you've got one, and at Christmas you sit at the table, and put something in. Start eating together as a family and put in this little tradition. Take a question each day and ask it at the dinner table. We actually did this a while back at work. We had a little jar on the table, and we eat together at work every day for lunch. So during lunch, we'd take a question and ask it. So maybe that's a piece of advice that we can give from this series is try to add something in. Take some of these resources we've made available. Julia, our time is fast approaching the end, so I'm going to need to wrap this up with you. But thank you so much for your input, and I just want to wish you all the best in your work on the front lines.
Okay, keep on. Bye.
Well, Mark, I'm always humbled and reminded how much input and value some of these guests have to add to this series, and I'm always grateful for that. We discussed a little bit in this interview today just the impact that parents have, really. We talked a little bit about social media, and ourselves as parents, we're on social media. Now we're all in the house together. It's actually reminded me that at the end of this episode, we're going to be showing just a short video just from some of our Mygrow clients talking about the impact that Mygrow has had specifically on their parenting. So stick around for that at the end of the episode. Mark, over to you. What else can we do just to make sure that we keep going in the right direction?
Yeah, I'm just reminded of what you suggested earlier, Theron, that a lot of times it's not about what we stop doing, it's about what we introduce. from Dr. Groovy in one of the previous episodes, and really just amazing sharing from people coming back to us about using the resources that are available on the Mygrow platform, especially around those questions for families to use at dinner time, and the 36 questions. I've also been doing my daily checklist there, and it's made a huge positive impact for me. And so keep using Mygrow, that online gym that's been given to you for free. These resources are really making a difference in people's lives. And of course, they'll help you with navigating some of these social media things.
Yeah. Quickly before we end, a couple of people have been asking what's going to happen with this webinar series now that the lockdown has been extended. If you're watching live, if you've been with us since the beginning, you'll know that we have one more episode until our initial plan is going to be concluded. We've decided to stick with you guys and keep it going into the extension that Uncle Cyril has given us.
Yes, man.
Over the following 2 weeks. Of course, if you're catching these on the reruns, then it doesn't really make much difference to you. But for those of you who've been journeying with us, we're going to continue to journey with you. We'll reimagine it slightly and trim it down, but do come back for the next webinar, because that's going to be a really great ending to this first season, and then we're going to continue it coming next week. Thanks very much. You may be alone, you may be going through this with others, but we're all in this together. And if we lean into the positive, we can make this time and this challenge something that will help us become better at being ourselves and better at life. We'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.
Understanding self, managing emotions, developing that EQ is critically important. Just as a parent, it's essential to becoming a good parent, because we impart so much on our children. As parents, we live under the microscope 24/7. We don't know what we don't know. And there are parts that other people know about us that we don't know. We go to places in Mygrow which are not always comfortable, but they are incredibly rewarding once you've worked through them. What Mygrow does, it helps to raise your awareness of those blind spots. And that's where the real learning for me has come from.